Hello and welcome to Dixon Cox with me, Nick Dixon, and Paul Cox, where we go through the week's news in a fairly light-hearted way. And if you want the full episodes, as ever, go to nickdixon.net for this and many other goodies. We do a whole extra podcast that's only available on there. I've got loads of interviews on there, loads of great stuff, my chat group, all this kind of thing, where we say our real opinions. nickdixon.net for all that. Very, very easy to afford. But we want to crack on this week because we've got this massive Trump story. And it's a kind of ongoing, escalating story. Now, some people say, oh, well, this is out of date. The thing is, this is a weekly podcast where we just cover everything from the week. So we're not like right on it with the meeting. So we're going to cover the Trump meeting, but also all the fallout that's happened since then. And on the day we record, JD Vance is in trouble for some of his remarks. So this thing just keeps going on and on. So, Paul, I thought we'd start with the actual meeting, which obviously we're a bit behind now, but we'll cover it anyway because it was so crazy. I said it was like watching Jerry Springer. I never seen anything like it. It was fascinating. It just absolutely kicked off between Trump, Vance, and Zelensky, of course. And you've got Zelensky there speaking English, which is quite strange. It's like, Mr. President. You're just not used to how weird his voice sounds in English. And he was getting in trouble for not wearing his suit, of course. And he's like, maybe I buy a suit. Maybe I get costume if we win. But costume, I think, apparently is similar to the word for suit in his language. So that's what he meant. And everyone's arguing about who was at fault. In some people's worlds, Zelensky was rude and arrogant. In other worlds, Trump was a bully and pathetic and childish, and so was Vance. My dispassionate analysis, trying to be very fair, which people always hate, that's going to get you hated on the internet. I just looked at the whole 50-minute meeting and I said, okay, what happened here is it was all fine. And then Vance did a fairly generic grandstanding anti-Biden rant. And foolishly, Zelensky suddenly went, but JD, let me ask you this, JD, and then just started to kick off. And once he'd challenged Vance in front of the world and in front of Trump, what does Trump value? Strength and loyalty. Vance can't back down, then can he? So he has to hit back. And then Zelensky's like, "Have you been to my country?" And like JD's like, "I've seen stories like." That's a no. Is that you never been? So, and then apparently Zelensky said that curse under his breath, which some people are saying means beach, but apparently it doesn't necessarily mean bitch. It can just mean for fuck's sake. We get told off for the swearing on this podcast, so FFS.
We did last time, didn't we? But
yeah, people hate the swearing, but they can get fucked. So anyway, the whole thing kicked off. My dispassionate analysis was it was probably Zelensky's fault. At that point, perhaps Trump could have responded better. Then go, excuse me, you're gambling with World War III. I mean, a great line, but he probably kicked off a bit too much. Perhaps Vance did. I think no one came out of it well. That's if we take it at face value and say it's not kayfabe, it's not WWE, and we just take it at face value. But who knows? Trying to figure out Trump's foreign policy is fascinating, and we can get into it all. There's the semiconductor deal. Is Trump more worried about China than Russia? He certainly seems to be. Were Vance's comments offensive that he said today about were they about Britain or not? We'll get into all that. But what did you think of the initial meeting, Paul?
Well, that was quite something, wasn't it? It really was something. And you're absolutely right. We have not seen anything like this before. Nobody has seen anything like this before play out in front of the TV cameras. I mean, our assumption is that this plays out behind the scenes on a regular basis. You know, even when it's not as contentious as Ukraine and Russia, there's a lot of things that get thrashed out in the background between the big cheeses. And I'm sure tempers do get lost and there are a lot of shouty words. What's really interesting, bearing in mind that we've never seen this before, how so many people believe they understand everything that's happened. So, as with everything in this age of 24-hour news, where you've got to have a reaction immediately, that's essentially what we got. We got an immediate reaction, which was an emotional reaction to what happened. Those that made most sense by about Saturday morning to me were impassionate about it, had watched the 50-minute clip, which is the full clip of what took place in that conference, and had perhaps looked at some of the stuff that had gone on previous to the meeting. But it's fascinating look into human nature, not just on the screen, the reaction that we've seen. I tried to sum up on Sunday. I said to me, obviously we've not seen anything like this. And I tried to understand what Trump got from it, because on the surface, and I, fully admit this is on the surface, and I did get a bit of stick for this, but I stand by it. It looked like Trump lost out slightly because it looked like Trump had lost his temper, acted as if he was a bully. Bear in mind, I've seen the 50-minute clip, but it's like any argument, isn't it? If you're arguing with your girlfriend for 3 hours long, but then in hour 4 you call her a fat something or other because you've just had enough, that is all that's remembered. There is, that's what's happened here essentially. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on, and then Trump said, World War III, we've got all the cards. And people are aghast, like that was terrible in some way. I don't think it was as terrible on reflection as we think. But I'm struggling even at this point now, but certainly on Sunday I was struggling to see what Trump had actually gained from it because, of course, politics is all about the optics. And the one thing it managed to do by Sunday afternoon was somehow unite the European leaders for about 20 minutes, which gave people like Keir Starmer some sort of pseudo upper hand. They started behaving as if they were in charge in some way. If you bear in mind what happened Sunday afternoon, they all got together and said, well, that was appalling, wasn't it? We're going to sort this out. But as soon as they did that, very, very quickly, they also said, but we can't do it without Daddy, which is Trump and the USA. So we've got this kind of situation which is incredibly serious. This isn't some popular politics debate where you're worried about woke ideology. This is potentially World War III. This is an ongoing war between Russia and the Ukraine, and Ukraine being supported essentially by the West. So it's essentially the West versus Russia. And Donald Trump, because he's Donald Trump, is trying to negotiate a peace deal in a way that only he can. And what him and Vance do is totally outside of the awareness of the political classes. So every time they do something, and we'll get on to the Vance stuff today, the way he spoke today, that's because he's not polished and trained. And that's the point. That's why these guys were voted in. They were voted in so they have these frank conversations in a normal way that people understand. And it's not just a big game of bullshit bingo where they're just whacking out words for the sake of it, which is what we get when you hear Starmer and Macron talk, of course. So we've got such an interesting thing going on where you've got all these kind of alphas and betas vying for the space. And some people are playing by the rules. By the rules, I mean those that have been set out by people like Starmer. And you've got people that are playing against the rules, like Trump. And as a result, Trump is getting measured by those rules. And I think the interesting point is, Nick, should he be?
Well, one person I spoke to who has worked with Trump said, yeah, this is just normal behind-the-scenes stuff he does all the time. And I did feel like that. You got a sense of Trump's toughness and how he might be in a negotiation. And it was pretty much how you expect he would be. At the same time, there was some journalist on LBC said, like, I've been behind the scenes in these meetings and it's never like this. So it is a bit disturbing to think about. I mean, obviously, I'm very pro-Trump, but to think about, I was watching 13 Days again, the movie about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And of course, it's just a movie. But you think they narrowly avoided war by the Kennedys being very, very careful, if the movie is true. And then you think, what would Trump do in that situation? And it might not be quite as careful. But I'm not suggesting we base everything on a movie like Julia Hartley-Brewer did when she said we should all watch Darkest Hour and learn from that. It's like, oh, really? No. Such boomer stuff is like everything's Churchill, but now everything's not even Churchill. It's the Churchill movie that we've got to base everything on. So that's our clueless media. But so just on some of these points, we certainly got a glimpse of tough negotiations. And Zelensky then wrote a very long, sort of fairly, and not fully apologetic, but somewhat. He's written a somewhat apologetic tweet thread and said other similar things, but he hasn't come out with a full apology. As we record, it looks as if Trump might be pausing military aid, which is just exactly the kind of thing you would expect Trump to do, pause military aid to Ukraine. You're not going to win against Trump, are you? Like, when you come in and try and confront Trump and out-Trump Trump, you never win. You've got to flatter him. And this is one thing that Starmer realized, like, Mr. President is so brilliant. Like, he basically came and just kissed ass for the whole meeting.
He did.
And that's how he did it. Would you like to meet the king? Because this is an unprecedented second state visit. He knows Trump would love that kind of thing. And Trump's been talking, whether Trump will go along with all Starmer's ideas is yet to be seen. But Trump's certainly been saying he's a great guy. We've been getting on so well, and that's what he likes, that kind of thing. Just have some brains then if you're Zelensky and just say, Mr. President, you are great. We would like weapons, but it's up to you. He's got to handle him a certain way. Instead, what he did, he got out those pictures, which are no doubt horrific, of prisoners, how they've been abused, the Ukrainian prisoners. And he said, you see, this is what they do. And he showed them to Trump in front of the media. And what's Trump going to do? Then Trump just looked at him and go, yeah, horrible. And that's why we want to end it, right? So he brought it back to his own
Yeah.
agenda. That's why we want to end this thing. And those are the two positions that are so far apart. One, that's why we need to end it. And two, that's why we need to defeat Putin. Zelensky came in calling Putin a terrorist, talking about him with pure hatred, as you'd expect. But it didn't seem like a guy who was ready to negotiate to me. And then he's made this comment just about yesterday as we record, saying that peace was still the end of the war is far away. And so Trump's written a tweet going, well, the guy clearly doesn't want peace. It just does seem they're in completely different positions. Zelensky thinks the end is far away. Starmer even talked about it being a turning point, whereas Trump sees it as the end. It's like, let's get this done and dusted. Let's be mates with Russia and let's worry about China. But they're not on board with it. They're not on the same page. What do you think?
Yeah, the thing about Starmer is, as we speak now, there's this idea that he may have gained some popularity and ground. He certainly united Parliament, with the exception of Nigel Farage and Reform, over the last few days. And I think that's just pure bluff and nonsense, really. I don't think Europe uniting for a couple of days is going to solve this issue. The people that are going to solve this are Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Zelensky. But Putin operates autocratically. He's not, he's totally on his own. He is a dictator. I'm happy to admit that. I don't think that's controversial to say in any way. And that's, the evidence is there. And Trump operates autocratically as well. And the reason he can operate autocratically is because he's bankrolling everything that Europe are promising. So it's okay for the Starmers and the Macrons and whoever's and the Zelenskys to some point to talk as much as they like, but ultimately the power doesn't lie with them. One thing I would say about Zelensky is if I was a Ukrainian, I would expect him to behave that way. I'd expect him to be boisterous. I'd expect him to be a war leader. I'd expect him not to take punches on the chin and fall over. I wouldn't, there are a lot of people who think Starmer had a good week, but he basically went to Donald Trump, kissed his ass, gave him a letter, said, you can see the king. Okay, so It's like he offered him tickets to a theme park. Ed Davey would have been over the moon. And now he's come back and he's talking, he's over here talking with one face about what he's going to do in Europe, and he's over here with another face telling us that we can't do it without Trump. Nothing that I'm seeing from Starmer tells me that he's any better than he was before he went to the Trump meeting last week. Nothing at all. I think it's all a bit of a nonsense, and I think it'll all blow over very quickly. The fact remains that this has to be negotiated between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And ideally, what it will do is it will include Zelensky. I mean, I don't think the Ukrainians should be out of the negotiation whatsoever. But he can't have a war without Trump, and he can't have peace without Trump. And if Trump wants peace and not war, then he's going to have to get behind him. We forget that just a week previous to that, Trump was changing the whole narrative, telling a few porkies, in my opinion, and trying to change the whole narrative, I think, to get Putin to the table and underplaying Zelensky's role and telling everybody Zelensky's a bit of a dictator because of things that he did or may not have done or had made up or whatever. So Zelensky was already very much on the back foot, and this is a fight from him. And what Europe have decided to do is say, no, we're fully backing Ukraine. Now, the argument I saw from their perspective is they're fully backing Ukraine because Ukraine is part of Europe and it borders Russia. And if they attack Europe and the Ukraine and we give in now, then Putin will just keep taking and taking and taking. I pose that he hasn't got the capability, military or otherwise, to keep taking and taking. So the threat is being over-exaggerated. And, we could play this back in 3 years' time, you or I in a nuclear bunker and going, Paul, what do you make of this then? Um, I could be wrong. I'm not a military strategist. I'm barely a political commentator. But I think that's been overplayed. I think that there has to be more compromise. Obviously, we are judging this whole conversation by the framework that's been built into us for decades and decades over our lives of how political negotiation, geopolitics is carried out. Donald Trump comes in and goes, absolutely not. And his sidekick is JD Vance. And he's like, absolutely not as well. We're going to do it this way. You had, and this is really important, you had 3 years to sort this. All Joe Biden did was give over trillions and trillions of dollars and say, just spend the money, lads, just spend the money, lads. Donald Trump has come in on a huge mandate to stop that spend because he's trying to make America great again, right? So he's trying to do that. And the best way he's trying to do that is through peace and a deal for minerals. So as JD Vance said today, the best way to get peace is to make sure that America economically prosper from the peace deal. Because if we've got an investment in Ukraine, we're not going to want it attacked. And you might think that's cynical capitalism, but it's the way of the world. And it's what, Vance and especially Trump are very, very good at. I thought it was unsavory, the scenes. But you know what? It's war. It's war. War isn't savory. Harking back to a movie scene is all very well and good because it invokes the right emotion. Remember when you saw that great movie and then we won the war? Well, I'm afraid, you know what? When that particular scene actually took place, people were fucking terrified and nobody really knew what the outcome of the war was going to be. And we find ourselves in a similar situation now where perhaps we just all have to stop for a sec and say, what do we want? A negotiation that is penned or a negotiation that ends up collapsing and there will be lots and lots of dead people. And those dead people will start coming from the UK, will start coming from France, will start coming from Germany, whatever it might be. And we have another world war on our hands. So sometimes we have to stop. And it just so happens that the guy who's trying to negotiate peace in his own interest, he's not hiding it, Donald Trump, in his own interest, the guy who is trying to negotiate peace, people don't like. Well, fuck me. That's no reason not to have peace, is it, Nick?
I know, and there's many historical figures that have not been that liked. And Bannon thinks Trump's a generational figure on the level of a George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, thinks he's a once-in-a-century figure, says he has to get a third term because of it, which is interesting and hilarious. But
I don't agree with that.
Well, we can get it another time. But Julia Hartley-Brewer, I watched Darkest Hour again last night. I suggest anyone cheering on Trump's demand for Zelensky to capitulate to Russia takes the time to watch the film too. They might learn something about how you should deal with the threat from dictators like Putin. So everything's always World War II forever. Dan Hodges, similar things. We're always going to be World War II forever. But even if we want to go there, couldn't we say that Churchill did a deal with Stalin at Yalta? Now, of course, Stalin turned out to be not a great guy, but you go like, you could just make the opposite argument using Churchill again if you really want to, and that was FDR and Stalin. I'd say that's more similar with Zelensky playing the Churchill role and then Trump and Putin filling in the roles. But this is what we have to believe: everything is World War II, everything is this boomer truth regime.
World War II was essentially a negotiated end. It was a negotiated. I mean, it had to be fought, but the negotiation was the tripact between the Soviets, the US, and the Allies, i.e., us and France.
Yeah, there was a war and then there was a negotiation following it, which is hopefully where we are. But people, obviously disagree.
Without bringing the US in and having that form of negotiation, there were negotiations. We had to be fought, and Hitler made some serious military errors. Steaming into the Russia in the way he did. But it wasn't without negotiation, and sometimes you have to negotiate with the people you don't want to. And look, no one. I'm not saying this, and I haven't heard you say this either, Nick. No one's saying that Zelensky is a dictator or is a bad guy in this. If you look at it in isolation, what Zelensky has done is defend his country. The wash up will happen. The wash up will happen, and we'll get the facts. Okay, and there are people much more knowledgeable on this than I am that we both know. That will tell us that Zelensky has done an absolutely amazing job and no one else could have done any better, and we should be stood behind him. And I don't have an issue with that. I really don't have an issue with that. When it's against Putin, of course, they're the enemy. But as I said yesterday on Twitter, on X, sorry, It's very dangerous to make Zelensky a deity. People
Yeah,
argue,
of
we're not
course.
making him a deity. Well, I'm afraid when you've got every politician of every type of background saying we must do this, I think it's just the same as when we got involved in maybe the gender debate, something like that, where you are told this is what you must think. And if anyone thinks any differently, they are wrong. And that's exactly what they're doing. This is the playbook. That's what they're doing with
Yeah,
Zelensky.
it's COVID again. It's our private media. Of course, the media line comes out, and you're also expected to constantly say, "And Putin's so evil." It's like, can we just have it as a given that we don't think Putin's this amazing guy because it's so banal? Simon said it last night on Headliners on GB News. He was totally right. We don't have to
I saw
keep
that clip.
stating that, and also we don't have to keep stating that. Well, there's one guy that could end all of this. It's Putin. If he just backed out and did what he wanted, it's like it's magical thinking. It's like, and Simon said you may as well treat him like an animal, like he just does what he
At the
does.
zoo.
I was thinking you could treat him like one of the elements. Like he's just a hurricane that is there. Like, would it be ideally the hurricane didn't smash up all those cars? Like, but that's what they do. It's like, yeah, but if Putin could end this, he doesn't want to, does he? Because he's Putin. So that's not on the table. So the fact you're just saying that repeatedly just shows you're a child. So,
Uh,
but this
And
thing
people
about
aren't taking. Sorry, Nick. I just want to say at that point, people aren't taking into consideration here what Putin's thinking or doing. Okay, everyone's forgotten at the moment. He can't be seen to lose the war. If he's seen to lose the war in some way, his power collapses. And if you think the potential of war against a known enemy is bad, war against an unknown enemy with a collapsed state with everyone against him is also incredibly bad.
Mhm. Yeah. And look at the level of our MPs. Graham Stewart MP, a Tory MP,
Yeah,
says we have to consider the possibility that President Trump is a Russian asset. If so, Trump's acquisition is the crowning achievement of Putin's FSB career, and Europe is on its own. It's like, really? That's the level of analysis? You're stuck in the Russia hoax? I just said most normal Tory MP. That's what we're dealing with. One thing you said that was really interesting was that about Starmer's two-facedness. And I put out a tweet on this because Dan Wootton had pointed out that Trump, and I noticed this straight away and went to Twitter and saw Dan's tweet. I noticed this watching the press conference that between Starmer and Trump, that Starmer was so pleased that the bust of Churchill was going to go back in its rightful place in the White House. But we know he took down portraits of Churchill at home.
what a
So
wanker.
I just said Starmer is playing the role of a normal prime minister abroad whilst being a rabid communist at home. And it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. It's like a way, when Vance challenged him on free speech, like, no, I'm really proud of our history of free speech. We have free speech. Excuse me. And it's just like, what are you doing abroad? You're playing the neoliberal from the 90s. You're like, it's like the fucking West Wing abroad. You're like, oh, everything's normal. Oh yeah, liberal democracy. And at home, you're just like, send him to jail for a Facebook post. You're sending people to jail or you're arresting people for praying in their heads. We all know what's going on, and we're destroying the country with immigration, and criminal immigrants get to do what they want. We all know we know about the grooming gangs, thousands of girls raped and tortured, ongoing for years and years. We all know what's happening domestically, but abroad, he gets to go, we are the bastion of free speech. Like, you're not. But what's so fascinating to me is how our progressive elite has to pretend to be pro free speech in these scenarios. So they realize that it's a value that ostensibly they should uphold, but they don't. But they sort of realize that they're supposed to pretend to. So he'll go abroad and say, "Yes, we love free speech." It's like, we know that none of you believe that, but it's a bit like they constantly go on about democracy. They frame everything in terms of they're protecting democracy, but they don't believe in democracy, which you can prove by Brexit. You can prove by cancelling local elections. You could say you can prove it with the Democrat Party who are very similar when they basically installed Kamala. So they always believe in free speech and democracy on paper, but they absolutely don't. But they're aware that they're supposed to still pretend to in this, I suppose, Potemkin way, to use a Dominic Cummings phrase. I'm just trying to find what I wrote about that because it just came into my head, but it doesn't matter because I've basically said it. Oh yeah, I said a strange feature of our progressive leaders is that they always have to pretend to be in favor of free speech, but now they actually have to act like it or be left behind by America. Yeah, that was my point, because Vance was saying, well, what are you guys doing on free speech? And it's not going to be enough for Starmer if he wants to get on with the Trump administration, which for now he's trying to finesse. But it's not going to be enough for him to just say we absolutely uphold free speech when he obviously doesn't. So that's going to be a big problem for him. But for now, Starmer is playing this very careful both sides thing, and he hasn't done terribly at it because he's been
No,
smarter than some people who have just weighed
hasn't changed
in.
my mind, but you're right. He has done well.
Well, but here's what Beth Ruby, I actually said. I'm wondering if Starmer wants to get into this war just to rescue his own popularity. And she's put like almost this in different words. She said, number 10 thought Starmer's way to win back collapsing public support was domestic delivery. Instead, it's been the arrival of Trump in the White House, the leadership vacuum it's created, as in her opinion, and the PM's response, which has given Starmer personal stature and his premiership new purpose and momentum. Basically, Starmer, yeah, perhaps this war is helping him. He's always constantly doing these war montages now with him being all warlike, and that's
And the
disgusting.
music as well.
But yeah, it's helped
Have you
him.
seen these videos, Nick?
I've seen them. This stuff, because you pump people with enough brainwashing to be in favor of these things. Then you deliver the video. And if you look at the polls, British people are 39% in support of putting troops on the ground in Ukraine, British troops, versus 30% against. So there is still support for the war. It's gone down. Statistics show it's gone down lately, but it is still a majority of support for the war. So he's kind of going off the back of that. He's looking good with Trump by just being basically cautious, which is actually one of the few good things he's done. Just that level of that, not steaming in like all our other politicians, except for Farage, who he's attacked anyway. So yeah, it's weirdly he might be helping Starmer in a kind of sick way.
Yeah, yes, and that was my tweet on Sunday. He did, but my point wasn't it's happening generally, it's happening in the vacuum of that moment. That's all, okay? Because when all's said and done, the duplicity of Keir Starmer is staggering. It'd be remiss of us not to mention the fact that the thing that everybody else screams at on Twitter is you can't defend your own border, Starmer. What makes you think you can defend the Ukrainian border? And whilst it's all a bit route one and slightly hack in terms of a political opinion, it's very difficult to argue against because you can show endless images of essentially the UK borders being invaded. That's the right word. Being invaded. They're not invited. We'd rather they didn't come. We've put a lot of money into stopping them from coming, yet they still come. Okay? And then when they do get here, we go, don't worry about it. Come on in, boys. And we look after them far better than perhaps they should do. Now, I'm not having a debate about whether we should or shouldn't. Okay? That's exactly what happens. And whether you like it or not, it bloody happens. And it's happening in a country that is crumbling. The infrastructure is crumbling. The culture is crumbling. Our own identity is crumbling. And all we're doing is just adding water to that and going, fucking let's just get this crumble down. And we're going to end up with, and what they're going to want to do at some point, I assume, Keir Starmer, because at the moment, he's no war leader. He's rallying the troops. So he's trying to get people together and he's trying to get people on board, and you've got everybody going, yes, absolutely, I can't believe it. All the people that just a couple of weeks ago thought Keir Starmer was the biggest dickhead they'd ever met in their life. There's some people now going, well, he is right on this. Look, I guess a broken clock can be right twice a day, but Keir Starmer has not changed. Keir Starmer has not changed whatsoever. And when it comes to the crunch, and we want to send Gen Z abroad to fight in a European war that many people don't want, all of a sudden they're going to start to scrutinise Starmer because he said boots on the ground and planes in the air. And then with his other face, he went, we can't do it without Donald, though. So what is it, mate? Because Donald doesn't want boots in the ground and planes in the air, and he's not going to send his own boots and his own planes. He's not even going to send his own money at the moment. So you're going to, are you? And you're leading this coalition of wet Weetabixes. Look at the people that are coalescing around Starmer to lead within Europe.
Yeah.
Just honestly, just the weakest bunch of liberal WEF wank socks you've ever seen.
There's some
other than the
stuff about
Italian
Zelensky as well, which we can get into.
Intelligent.
It's so hard to keep up with all this because by the time this podcast is out, China will have invaded Russia or something. The whole thing keeps changing. And this is that Zelensky calls Trump showdown regrettable. Let's get into that in a sec. I just wanted to say first that, Mandelson has actually been one of the few sensible ones. Of course, he's the US ambassador now, Peter Mandelson. And he came on saying Zelensky needs to come back to Trump. He needs to sort it out, get the deal. We need to be pro this peace. He's fully pro the Trump line. And then this guy, Luke Pollard, who's some Labour guy, he came back and said he was wrong in that case. He's Labour member of Parliament for Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport. And by the way, him still has his pronouns in the bio. Might not update that, Luke. that fad is over, mate. Get on the Ozempic. That's the new fad. So he's like, he he seems to have married a bloke as well. That's interesting. Um, he said that Mandelson was wrong. So it's like, what is the line here? And I wondered if really Mandelson was given the real line. And Starmer gets to grandstand and hug Zelensky and go, "Look how well we get it. It was just so great." And we've lent them 2.6 billion. We lent 2.26 billion, though. In context, the USA has given Ukraine about 175 billion, I believe. So let's calm down. But Pollard said that Mandelson was wrong. So it's like, well, what is your position then? But to me, it seems like Mandelson was giving the realist position. Oh, someone's just written now on Twitter, "You were right." The favorite words in the English language,
Oh my
Nick.
God.
You were right.
Podcast over. No point. Nick's going for...
So I wrote, lots of people say Mandelson has gone rogue, which they were, but seems more likely this is our actual position while Starmer gets to grandstand and hug Zelensky. And I said that 3rd of March. Someone wrote, "You were right," and it's Zelensky, "I'll come back to the negotiating table," in the Telegraph. So this will be old news by the time this comes out.
Here's what's going to happen, Nick.
Huh?
And absolutely right, okay? Starmer's playing games to improve his popularity, and anyone who thinks otherwise has been fooled by it. I'm really sorry. It's so obvious. It's ridiculous. The thing that he's trying to create is not a thing and not going to happen. What I predict will happen, and by the way, Mandelson, I'm sure, is involved in a lot of these conversations and just quietly in the background saying all the honest things, so that they can refer to that at some point. By the way, oh no, we always said what Mandelson said, etc. No load of bollocks. But what's going to happen is the mineral deal is going to get signed. Zelensky and Trump will patch it up enough so that he's still got his support, and we'll start working towards a ceasefire at first, I guess, and then I assume peace. And what's you mentioned earlier that the one man that can fix this is Vladimir Putin. Well, yes, it is. He's not going to just come and go, "Oh, I've had enough now, lads. Let's draw the line here and stop it." There's going to need to be a full-blown negotiation. And as I said, the only person who's going to be able to do that is Donald Trump. You can't stick Zelensky and Putin in a room. That's not going to work out.
I mean, look at this. So Zelensky's just come out as we record, and hopefully we'll get this out this evening, so it won't be too out of date for the Substack subscribers. The rest will be out on YouTube next day, so it won't be too out of date. But Zelensky says, "I would like to reiterate Ukraine's commitment to peace. None of us wants an endless war. Ukraine is..." Actually, it would have been, "None of us wants endless war. Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer." So that's pretty big. I'm going to come back to the table. "Nobody wants peace more than Ukrainians. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts." I mean, that is just full capitulation. Trump is strong. I've always said it. He's so strong, and we just want peace. That's just like fully like kissing Trump's ass. Because, yeah, as you say, I mean, that's the reality. 175 billion. You need the United States. You can't be doing a strop and running off, because that's how negotiations work. If you're in the power position and you can genuinely walk away, right? Trump's like, you're always going to be prepared to walk away. Trump actually is prepared to walk away.
Yeah,
it feels like to me, whereas Zelensky can't walk away. So it's all silliness.
Well, and Starmer, look, I get it. If you're a staunch Starmer Labour voter, you're going to be very pleased with what's going on, because you're going to think, crikey, it's been a tough 8 months or whatever. But finally, it looks like we've got something to cheer about. But when all's said and done, it's niff-naff and trivia what they're doing. Starmer's done the complete opposite to some. He's not prepared to walk away. He's prepared to walk in. He's prepared to get people killed to increase his populism. Now, if your argument to that is, "Oh, he wouldn't do it, no one's going to get killed, don't overreact," then all you're doing is undermining Starmer anyway. So it was all horseshit in the first place. So whatever way you look at this, I don't think materialistically Starmer has achieved anything. In terms of optics, it may have improved his popularity, and we'll see. And perhaps it was shrewd to get everybody together and say, "Well, we're standing behind Ukraine." Perhaps it's a no-lose strategy. But ultimately, it's just playing mummies and daddies. They're just dressed up. They put their mum's shoes on, bit of makeup, and gone, "Yeah, we're going to play at war now."
Yeah. And the sort of Machiavellian way of framing it is that Starmer is a fox, not a lion. You know, you've got the Machiavelli's terms. He had foxes and lions used actual force, and foxes used soft power and manipulation. And we're all foxes in the West all the way. Putin's an actual lion, and that's the big divide we're seeing. And it's like, is Trump going to go full lion? Is the world moving to lions now? Is it moving back to great men, as some people have said, great powers at war, which obviously has downsides like war, but it has the upside of less bullshit. Whereas Starmer still exists in the bullshit world of foxes, of nonsense and bureaucracy. So that's what we're seeing. The Western powers going, oh, well, Europe going, oh, we need to, we're like all tough now. And it was like, are you though? So that's fascinating. As you put it sort of quite colorfully. I'm just putting it in another way. But yeah, so Zelensky's going to come back to the table. What about this Vance thing? I'm just wondering if we should get to the comments on Farage first. We'll do that later. We'll do the Vance thing because this may be nothing by the time it comes out because it's so nothingy really. But Vance made these sort of somewhat controversial comments where he said that what will really bring peace essentially was the US stake in Ukraine, US people being there working on minerals, etc. And he said that was a better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. And of course, this kind of thing's bound to kick off. Vance maybe didn't think it through that well. Even Farage has called it wrong, I believe, which sounds very Farage. Wrong. And Kemi Badenoch said people are getting carried away. He didn't mean Britain. Let's calm down. Vance himself tried to roll back on it. He said that he never meant that. He said this is absurdly dishonest in reply to a kind of standard smear job. He said this is absurdly dishonest. I don't even mention the UK or France in the clip, both of whom have fought bravely alongside the US over the last 20 years and beyond. But let's be direct. There are many countries who are volunteering privately or publicly support who have neither the battlefield experience nor the military equipment to do anything meaningful. So you wonder who he meant. I mean, did he mean Sweden? They were one of the countries that offered troops, and they haven't done that much militarily. But then someone else put a list of countries that have fought alongside the US in Afghanistan, and it included a lot of these European countries, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Denmark, Spain, Romania. So you just go, was his comment actually valid on any level? It was a bit flippant. It wasn't the brightest. He's a smart guy, but it wasn't his brightest moment. But of course, all our hacks are jumping in. Johnny Mercer, who threw the late Roger Scruton under the bus, says this clown needs to check his privilege. I read his book, making the mistake of finding him quite interesting, but by his own admission, he spent his time in the Marines writing articles and taking pictures. That's true. He was there in a journalistic capacity for about 6 months. Perhaps if he had got his hands dirty serving his country like so many of his fellow American and British veterans, chasing his own country's crazy foreign policy ideas, he might not be so quick to dismiss their sacrifice. I mean, yeah, it's grandstanding because I don't think he meant to be dismissive. He was in the Marines. Obviously, he respects the military. I don't know. What do you make of it all, Paul?
So first things first, JD Vance is not.
DJ Vance is good though. Available for weddings.
I mean,
DJ
as I said,
Vance.
I thought it fucking should be. Somebody should do a little house remix of some of his Munich speech.
Yeah.
Superb. That would be fantastic.
Some people in the UK can't even do silent prayer.
That would be DJ Vance. That would be absolutely superb. But whilst he could well be a DJ, he's not a traditional polished politician. And the only defense for him in this is that he isn't one of those things. So he is going to misspeak. And what he was trying to do there was point out once again, this needs to be the mineral deal. If we've got an investment in Ukraine, then we will protect that investment for years to come. That's how you get peace. And by the way, you can't do it without us because we hold all the cards. That was his point, okay? What he was trying to do, and he didn't do very well, was undermine the rest of everybody and say, look, you haven't been able to do this without any of us. No one's really done this in the last 30 or 40 years. In doing so, he rather regrettably chucked a whole bunch of veterans under the bus, but only if you wanted to frame it that way. And Johnny Mercer, I mean, that was just a projection of his personal views. He just is, people just, what they do is they set up this straw man, they frame something, and it enables them to say what they really want to say. Now, we do it on the right, people do it on the left. It's just political fodder. It's what happens, okay? And this is the sort of thing that will gain a little bit of traction in the next 24 hours because, of course, our veterans fought valiantly. And weirdly, from the left, they seem to be proud of that at the moment. Because I live in Portsmouth, okay, and saying I support the Navy because I'm from Portsmouth and grown up around the Navy, in comedy clubs, amongst acts and audience members, particularly in the more metropolitan cities where certain clubs are, has not been greeted in any way with pride. They see anything associated with the military and the navy and the protection of our country and the Union Jack and Great Britain and our culture as bad. And all of a sudden, when it works for them politically, like Johnny Mercer has here, and I'm not taking anything away from Johnny Mercer, he could well be very proud of our military. What I'm saying is that there are definitely people out there, wet liberal, North London liberal elites, that couldn't give two fucks about our military, don't care about the culture of our country. They care about where they're getting their sour bread, and that's it, their sourdough. So I don't even know the words because I grew up in a council estate. But so I won't take any lectures from those people, and not that they're lecturing me, but we shouldn't take any lectures from those people. I'm just going to call him DJ now. DJ, he misspoke, and it's poor politics, but he's not a politician, not in the traditional sense. Neither's Donald Trump. You can. This is why it won't stick, because it's never stuck with Donald Trump. You know, you can criticize him and say how uncouth he is, how crass he is, you know, how ill-educated he is, how he doesn't understand X and he doesn't understand Y. It doesn't matter. It doesn't stick. He's got a massive manifesto. He came back after being cheated out of an election in 2020 and smashed the election in 2024, and now he's delivering on it. And people aren't going to like it. Of course they don't, because he got, 50 odd percent, 60% of the vote. So there's still a massive amount of the electorate in the US alone that don't like it. And of course, we were told on repetition that Donald Trump was Adolf Hitler. So there are still some people who believe that. And all this is doing now is feeding into that narrative. DJ, Mr. Vancey boy, he will have to polish some of that stuff up. It's not a big deal, not for me. I don't think it'll stay. I think people enjoy it for 24 hours or more. We know Ed Davey has. I've been looking at his tweets because I'm always on Ed Davey watch. Look, it's important to remember our veterans. Nobody's, JD Vance is not saying it's not.
No,
he just, I think, misspoke.
And certainly, and you talk about our Navy. We had the greatest Navy in the world. I'm told they are still the best. We don't necessarily have the numbers, but we've always been about. Apparently, a lot of people say we've always been about Navy rather than pure numbers. It's interesting that I don't know enough about it to think of what the role of the Navy is. I mean, it'd be nice if they let them stop the boats, but because it's all about drones now, so you wonder what the role of the Navy is. But we can talk about the future of Trump's strategy in the US and Europe and all that. Maybe we'll talk about that on nickdixon.net and the semiconductor deal that Trump's done with Taiwan, which I think is really interesting. It's much more interesting than it sounds. And maybe we'll also talk about Priti Patel attacking Nigel Farage because she's attacked him over this whole thing and saying that he's being too nice to Putin or whatever she's saying. The Tory response. Maybe we'll get into that as well. But I think maybe we'll do that on nickdixon.net because we don't want to go on for hours and hours. So we'll end this on YouTube and audio. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. I'll put the rest on my Substack, nickdixon.net. You can shout at us and cry that it's behind a paywall. Thank you, Paul. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, a huge thank you to particularly the freebie viewers that have watched this. Do go to nickdixon.net. And thanks for your support on Substack as well. I got an influx of Substack followers over the last week. I'm now in the order of about 50, which is great. I was on 17 when I said this last week. And I got 3 paid subscribers as well. So I've already thanked them individually, naturally, and sent them the promised nudes. Hope you received them. I hope you received them with love. And if that's what you would like as well, please support me. Go to @PaulCoxComedy everywhere. Substack, Twitter, your mum's house.
What? So how do you get? What is the Substack @PaulCoxComedy?
Yeah, so it's just if you just look Paul Cox Comedy up on Substack, you'll find me.
Okay, all right. Well,
look in the comments. Look in the if you're if you're watching this on Substack, well, you'll find me in the comments because I always go and have a look and. It's only on YouTube I really get involved in the comments because we get some absolute stinkers on there. We get people who really haven't watched the show at all, aren't interested in it, and will either come in on you for some ridiculous reason or come in on me because I'm not quite the foil that they want you to have. And for those people, we don't care. I mean, get
tough
involved.
To get it right. Tough to please everyone. But hope you enjoyed the show. See some of you on nickdixon.net and see the rest of you next week.